The Life and Death of the Mayor of Casterbridge by Thomas Hardy.
Chapter 14 of the novel, The Mayor of Casterbridge, by Thomas Hardy describes the beginning of a Martinmas summer for Mrs. Henchard, who has recently entered her husband's large house and respectable social circle. The chapter also introduces Elizabeth Jane, Mrs. Henchard's daughter, who has come to live with her mother after the death of her father. The chapter describes how Mr. Henchard shows some semblance of affection towards his wife, despite not being able to give her deeper affection. He makes changes to their home, such as painting the old iron railings and Georgian sash windows in bright colors, to make it more lively and welcoming. Elizabeth Jane is also introduced in this chapter as a character who observes what goes on in the house and around it. She notices that Mr. Henchard and his manager Donald Farfrae are inseparable and that they share a close bond. She also experiences a sense of freedom and indulgence during this summer. Overall, this chapter sets the stage for the rest of the novel by introducing key characters and establishing their relationships with each other. Mr. Henchard had the old iron railings and Georgian sash windows painted in bright colors to make his house more lively and welcoming. The heavy barred, small-paned, Georgian sash windows were enlivened with 3 coats of white, and the iron railings that had rusted for the last 80 years were painted a bright green. Mrs. Henchard was aware that her husband's affection towards her was not deep, but she appreciated the semblance of affection he showed her in external actions. She did not pine for deeper affection than he could give and was content with the life she had with him. Elizabeth Jane is Mrs. Henchard's daughter who comes to live with her mother after the death of her father. Elizabeth Jane's relationship with Mrs. Henchard is that of a mother and daughter, but it is somewhat strained due to Mrs. Henchard's past actions towards Elizabeth Jane. Elizabeth Jane observed that Mr. Henchard and Donald Farfrae were inseparable and that Henchard had a tigerish affection for the younger man. She also noticed that Henchard tended to domineer over Farfrae, but this was checked in a moment when Donald exhibited marks of real offense. Additionally, Elizabeth Jane saw that their habit of walking and driving about together rather neutralized Farfrae's value as a second pair of eyes, which should be used in places where the principle was not. This chapter sets the stage for the rest of the novel by introducing the main characters and their relationships with each other. It also establishes the setting of the story, which is a small town in rural England. The chapter hints at the conflicts that will arise between Mr. Henchard and Donald Farfrae, as well as the strained relationship between Mrs. Henchard and her daughter Elizabeth Jane. Additionally, it provides insight into Mr. Henchard's character and his desire to improve his social standing, which will be a recurring theme throughout the novel. Overall, this chapter lays the foundation for the plot and themes that will be explored in subsequent chapters. (1) Inseparable. Unable to be separated or treated separately. 2. Cannonade. A continuous heavy gunfire. 3. Domineer. Assert one's will over another in an arrogant way. 4. Neutralize. Render ineffective or harmless. 5. Semblance. The outward appearance or apparent form of something, especially when the reality is different. (1) Thrive under. To grow or develop well in a particular situation. 2. Sweep away. To remove something completely. 3. Take the place of. to replace something or someone. 4. Bear under, to support the weight of something or someone. 5. Talk to have a conversation with someone. Corn and hay traffic. This is a collocation that refers to the business of buying and selling corn and hay. Ledgers and letters. This is a collocation that refers to the use of written records to keep track of business transactions. Rugged picturesqueness. This is a collocation that describes the rough, rustic quality of something that is also visually appealing. Perfect cannonade of laughter. This is a collocation that describes a loud, continuous burst of laughter. Curious interest. This is a collocation that describes an unusual or unexpected level of interest in something. Inconveniences swept away. This is a collocation that describes the elimination of problems or difficulties. Familiarly on his manager's shoulder. This is a collocation that describes a friendly and informal gesture of physical contact. Accurate observation. This is a collocation that describes careful and precise attention to detail.